The smell of hay and earth filled the agricultural dome when the emergency sirens began their horrible wailing. Rachel Webb dropped the scanner she had been using to check the health of the station's chickens and ran. Her boots hit the metal floor hard as she sprinted through the curved hallways of Harmony Station. Other people pressed themselves against the walls to let her pass. Everyone knew that sound. Someone was dying. The medical bay doors hissed open before she reached them. Inside was chaos. A group of tall reptilian aliens filled most of the space. Their scales were deep red and burgundy, catching the harsh white lights. They were Draven warrior people from 3 systems away. Rachel had only seen them once before during a diplomatic meeting. Now they were here, and one of them was roaring in grief. "Stand back," Healer Moss clicked in the sharp way Quillen spoke when stressed. The insect-like doctor's multiple arms worked over a small form on the main medical table. "There is nothing more I can do. The toxin has spread too far." Rachel pushed through the crowd until she could see. A tiny Draven lay on the table. Just a child, a cub. Her scales were pale pink instead of the deep red of adults. Her chest barely moved. Crystalline formations grew under her skin like frost spreading across a window. The largest Draven male lunged forward. Station security guards in their blue uniforms struggled to hold him back. His roar shook the walls. "Do something! She is my daughter, Myrina! Commander Trowell, please." Station Director Phillips stepped between the grieving father and the medical team. He was a short human who usually seemed confident. Now he looked small and tired. "Our doctors have done everything possible. The toxin is unknown. It does not respond to any treatment in our database." "I'm sorry." Trowell's voice dropped to something more dangerous than a roar. "My child dies and you offer me sorry?" Rachel moved closer to the table. Healer Moss was disconnecting the medical equipment. The decision had been made. The cub was lost. Rachel stared at the small body and something familiar tickled at her memory. The crystalline deposits under the scales, the way the breathing had become shallow and irregular, the slight tremors in the limbs. "Wait." Rachel spoke before she thought about it. "Those symptoms. I have seen something like this before." Every head turned toward her. Healer Moss's compound eyes focused on Rachel with what might have been pity. "Dr. Webb, you are a veterinarian for Earth animals. This is a Draven child with an unknown xenotoxin. There is nothing. On Earth, some reptiles react to organophosphate poisoning exactly like this." Rachel pointed at the cub. "The crystallization, the respiratory collapse, the neural seizures. It matches." Director Phillips shook his head. "Dr. Webb, galactic medicine is far beyond anything from Earth. If Healer Moss cannot save her, then let me try." Rachel surprised herself with how firm her voice sounded. "I have treated hundreds of poisoned reptiles. Snakes, lizards, turtles. I know what works." "Ridiculous." Healer Moss made a gesture of dismissal with 2 of their arms. "Human medicine is primitive. You lack the proper training for xenobiology. The galactic medical community does not even recognize she is dying anyway." Trowell's voice cut through the argument. He had stopped fighting the guards. His eyes, golden and slitted like a cat's, fixed on Rachel. What harm can this human do that death has not already claimed? Healer Moss chittered in protest. "The protocols are clear. When treatment fails, we must honor the death customs of the species. For Draven, that means—" "I know what it means." Trowell's shoulders sagged. "Take my daughter to the ceremonial chamber. Prepare the cooling platforms. I will sing her into the dark." 2 medical staff carefully lifted the tiny cub onto a hovering stretcher. Her arm fell limply over the side. She looked so small. Rachel watched them carry her away and felt something break inside her chest. 5 years ago, she had stood in a hospital on Earth and watched doctors shake their heads over her own daughter. Cancer, they had said. Nothing more we can do. She had felt this same crushing helplessness. I could be wrong. Rachel spoke quietly, more to herself than anyone else. The biology might be too different. Human treatments might make it worse. But I have seen this before. I know I have. Director Phillips put a hand on her shoulder. I am sorry, Dr. Webb, I know you want to help. But we cannot allow unauthorized treatment. The legal complications alone. Rachel pulled away from his hand. She looked at Healer Moss, at Director Phillips, at the security guards who had released Commander Trowell. They had all given up. They had declared the cub lost because their computers and protocols had no answers. Maybe they were right. Maybe galactic medicine, with all its advanced technology, really had tried everything possible. Or maybe they had just tried everything they knew. The crowd began to disperse. The emergency was over. Just another tragedy in the vast galaxy. Another child lost to something nobody understood. Rachel walked slowly back toward the agricultural section. Her hands shook. In her mind, she kept seeing that tiny arm hanging off the stretcher. Kept seeing Trowell's eyes so full of grief. She had lied earlier. She did not just think she had seen this before. She knew she had. 3 years ago, a rare Burmese python at the zoo had been poisoned by contaminated rodents. The toxin had created the same crystalline deposits, the same respiratory failure. Everyone had said the snake would die, but Rachel had not given up. She had used activated charcoal, chelation therapy, forced oxygenation, methods that were centuries old on Earth, simple compared to galactic medicine. The snake had lived. That night cycle, Rachel lay in her small quarters and stared at the ceiling. She thought about protocols and rules and the legal complications Director Phillips had mentioned. She thought about her own daughter, and how she would have broken any rule, violated any protocol for just one more chance. The station lights dimmed to simulate night. In the ceremonial chamber, Commander Trowell would be singing death songs over his daughter. The cooling platforms would be slowly lowering the temperature of her body, preserving it for the journey home. Rachel sat up. She pulled on her uniform jacket and grabbed her medical bag from the closet. Her hands had stopped shaking. She knew exactly what she was going to do, and she knew it might cost her everything. But that little cub deserved one more chance. Even if it came from a primitive human who nobody believed in. Harmony Station ran on a cycle that mimicked Earth's day and night, though Rachel had never quite adjusted to it. The corridors were dim during night hours, lit only by soft blue emergency strips along the floor. Most of the crew would be sleeping or in their quarters. Security made fewer patrols during this time. Rachel had counted on that. She moved quickly through the empty hallways, her medical bag heavy against her shoulder. The ceremonial chamber was in the oldest part of the station, a section that predated human involvement in the galactic community. The walls here were smooth metal instead of the newer composite materials. Her footsteps echoed. The chamber door was unlocked. Why would it be secured? Nobody interrupts a death vigil. Nobody except a desperate human with nothing left to lose. The room inside was cold and dark. Cooling platforms lined one wall, each designed for different species and their unique death customs. Only one was active, glowing with soft purple light. On it lay Rena, the Draven cub, so still she might have already been dead. Beside the platform sat Commander Trowell. His massive form was hunched over, making him seem smaller. He sang in a low, rumbling language that Rachel did not understand, but the grief in it needed no translation. The sound of a parent losing a child was the same in any language. Rachel stepped forward. The door hissed shut behind her. Trell's song stopped instantly. His head snapped up and his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run. "You should not be here, human." His voice was rough from singing. "This is a sacred time." "I know." Rachel set her bag down on the floor and knelt beside it, starting to pull out equipment. "I am sorry to intrude, but I cannot let her die without trying." Trowell rose to his full height. He towered over Rachel by at least 3 feet. His claws extended slightly from his fingers. The doctors said there was nothing to be done. "You said you might be wrong. You said you might make it worse." "I did say that." Rachel's hands moved steadily, checking her supplies. Activated charcoal suspension, chelation compounds, portable oxygen concentrator, everything she had been able to gather from the agricultural section, and her own emergency supplies. And it is all true. I might be completely wrong. What I'm about to try might fail. It might even hurt her more. Then why? Trowell's claws retracted slowly. Why come here? Why risk making her suffering greater? Rachel stopped and looked up at him. 5 years ago, my daughter got sick. Cancer. Earth doctors tried everything they knew. When they ran out of options, they told me to prepare for the end. They were kind about it. They said there was nothing more that could be done. She turned back to her equipment. But I kept thinking, what if there was something? What if somewhere, someone knew a treatment that our doctors had not tried? What if we gave up too soon? What happened to your daughter? She died. The words still hurt after all this time. But I never stopped wishing I had tried harder. Demanded more. Broken more rules. Rachel stood and faced Trowell directly. I cannot save my daughter. But maybe I can save yours. Trowell stared at her for a long moment. His eyes moved from Rachel to the tiny form on the cooling platform. Rena's chest barely rose and fell. The crystalline deposits had spread further since Rachel had last seen her. Time was running out. "If you fail," Trowell said slowly, "if you cause her pain, if you make her death harder, I will kill you. Not quickly. Not with honor. I will make you suffer as she suffers." Rachel nodded. "I understand. I accept those terms. And if you succeed?" Something changed in Trowell's expression. "If you save her when all others have failed, then you will have returned my bloodline from the edge of extinction. The debt would be beyond measure. I do not want payment." Rachel moved to the cooling platform. "I just want her to live. Will you help me?" Trowell moved the controls on the platform, raising the temperature back to normal levels. "Tell me what you need." Rachel worked quickly. She explained as she went, partly to organize her own thoughts and partly because Trowell deserved to know what she was doing to his daughter. The toxin has bonded to her system at a molecular level. Galactic medicine tried to target it directly, but that failed because they do not know what they are targeting. My approach is different. I am going to bind the toxin to compounds that her body can eliminate naturally. She mixed the activated charcoal suspension with a saline solution and loaded it into an injector designed for human livestock. This will absorb the toxin in her digestive system. It will not cure her, but it stops more poison from spreading. Trowell held his daughter steady while Rachel administered the injection. Rena did not even flinch. She was too far gone to feel it. Next came the chelation compounds. These were trickier. Rachel had to calculate dosages based on Rena's body weight and what little she knew about Draven metabolism. Too much would strip essential minerals from her system. Too little would be useless. This is the dangerous part, Rachel admitted. "I am guessing at the dosage. If I am wrong, do it," Trowell interrupted. "Death is certain. Risk is better." Rachel injected the chelation compound directly into Rena's bloodstream. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then Rena's body began to convulse. The seizures were violent, her small form thrashing on the platform. Trowell held her down with surprising gentleness despite his size. "Is this normal?" His voice was tight with controlled panic. "I do not know." Rachel monitored Rena's vital signs on a handheld scanner she had borrowed from the agricultural section. "This is not a normal situation. Her body might be fighting the treatment, or the toxin might be breaking down. I cannot tell yet." The door to the ceremonial chamber suddenly hissed open. Healer Moss stood in the entrance, their compound eyes reflecting the purple light. Behind them were 2 security guards. "Dr. Webb, step away from the patient immediately." Moss's voice carried the weight of authority. "You are in violation of station medical protocols, galactic health regulations, and—" "No." Trowell moved to block the doorway. His bulk filled the entire entrance. "The human is under my protection. She is attempting to save my daughter. Anyone who interferes will face me. Commander, please be reasonable." Director Phillips pushed past the guards. He looked tired and angry. "Dr. Webb means well, but she's not qualified for this. She could make everything worse. We have protocols for a reason. Your protocols declared my daughter dead." Trowell's voice was dangerously quiet. "This human did not. I choose to trust her." On the platform, Rena's seizures were getting worse. Her vital signs fluctuated wildly on Rachel's scanner. The crystalline deposits seemed to be spreading faster now instead of dissolving. Rachel's heart sank. She had been wrong. She had made it worse. She had killed this child. "Please, Commander Trowell, let us help." Healer Moss tried to move past him. "Dr. Webb clearly does not know what she is doing. The child is deteriorating rapidly." Rachel barely heard them arguing. She focused on Rena, on the scanner readings, on everything she knew about toxicology and reptilian biology. Something was wrong with her approach, but what? The seizures, the spreading crystals, the vital signs dropping. It looked like total system failure unless— "She is purging." Rachel spoke suddenly. "The chelation is working. The seizures are not from the toxin. They are from the compounds binding to it, and her body trying to eliminate everything at once. She needs support, not intervention." Rachel grabbed the oxygen concentrator and fitted a mask over Rena's small snout. She adjusted the flow rate, forcing oxygen into lungs that had almost stopped working. Then she pulled out packets of electrolyte solution and began mixing them in precise ratios. "What are you doing now?" Trowell asked. His claws were fully extended again, keeping her alive while her body fights. Rachel worked without looking up. The treatment is working, but it is too aggressive. She needs fluid support and oxygenation, or her organs will shut down before she can recover. Rena's body went completely still. The scanner showed her heart had stopped. Rachel heard Tral make a sound like something breaking. Without hesitation, she placed both hands on Rena's small chest and began compressions. It was brutal and primitive, the kind of thing that galactic medicine had abandoned centuries ago in favor of automated cardiac stimulation. But Rachel did not have automated equipment. She had her hands and her knowledge and her desperate hope. She counted compressions in her head while maintaining the oxygen flow. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, repeat. Again. Again. Stop, Healer Moss said quietly. She is gone. Rachel ignored them and kept working. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. She felt something crack under her hands. A rib, probably. She kept going. Rena gasped. It was weak, barely a sound, but it was a breath. Her own breath. Her heart fluttered on the scanner, then beat once, then again. Rachel kept the oxygen flowing and watched the readings climb slowly from critical to merely terrible. The room was completely silent, except for the hiss of the oxygen concentrator and the soft beeping of the scanner. Everyone stared at the small Draven cub who had been dead moments ago and was now breathing on her own. Impossible, Healer Moss whispered. Rachel sat back on her heels, her arms shaking from exertion. Not impossible, just difficult. She looked up at Tral. She is not out of danger yet. This is going to be a long night. Tral knelt beside his daughter and gently stroked her head with one massive claw. When he looked at Rachel, his eyes were wet. Then we will face the night together, human. You and I. Director Phillips opened his mouth to object, then closed it again. Healer Moss made a gesture of confusion with their multiple arms. The security guards looked at each other uncertainly, but none of them moved to stop Rachel as she settled in beside the cooling platform, with her primitive equipment and impossible determination. The night cycle stretched ahead, full of uncertainty and fragile hope. Hour by hour, Rachel watched numbers on her scanner and adjusted treatments that seemed to come from instinct as much as knowledge. Rena's vital signs climbed from critical to stable, then dipped again when her body struggled with the chelation process. Each time, Rachel compensated with fluids, oxygen, or mineral supplements she mixed by hand, using ratios she calculated in her head. Healer Moss had stayed despite the initial hostility. The Quillen doctor stood at a respectful distance, watching everything Rachel did with intense focus. Occasionally, Moss would ask a question in that clicking language of theirs. Why did Rachel choose that particular mineral ratio? How did she determine when to increase oxygen flow? What signs was she looking for to indicate improvement? Rachel answered each question while her hands kept working. She explained that she was not following any specific protocol. Instead, she observed Rena constantly and responded to what her body was telling them. The slight color change in her scales meant dehydration. The way her breathing shifted indicated acid buildup. The temperature fluctuations showed her metabolism trying to rebalance. But how do you know these things? Moss moved closer, their multiple eyes examining the equipment Rachel had assembled. Draven physiology is not well documented in standard medical databases. You should not be able to interpret these signs. I don't know Draven physiology specifically. Rachel checked the oxygen levels again. But I know reptiles. I grew up on a ranch in Montana. We had to understand animals because the nearest vet was 3 hours away. You learn to read the small signs. You learn to think about underlying principles instead of memorizing specific treatments. Tral had not moved from his position beside his daughter. He held one of her small hands in his massive one, careful not to squeeze. His eyes never left her face. On Draven we have a saying, the warrior who knows one weapon is strong. The warrior who understands all weapons is unstoppable. Humans had to be adaptable. Rachel mixed another electrolyte solution. Earth has millions of different species. Mammals, reptiles, birds, fish, insects. We learned medicine by studying all of them. We found patterns that work across different types of life. Director Phillips had left hours ago, muttering about reports he would have to file. The security guards changed shifts twice. Through it all, Rachel worked. Her back ached from bending over the platform. Her eyes burned from staring at the scanner. Her hands cramped from mixing compounds and adjusting equipment. She ignored all of it. Around the 4th hour, Rena's crystalline deposits began to dissolve. It started at the edges where the formations were thinnest. Rachel watched through a magnifying lens as the toxic crystals broke apart, and were absorbed back into her bloodstream. The chelation compounds grabbed them, bound them, prepared them for elimination. It is working. Moss's voice carried genuine amazement. The toxin is being removed from her system. But this should not be possible. Our automated medical systems attempted similar approaches and failed. Your systems probably tried to remove everything at once. Rachel adjusted the chelation drip. I am going slowly, letting her body adapt. It takes longer, but it is safer. Moss chittered thoughtfully. Galactic medicine focuses on efficiency. We use computers to calculate optimal treatment protocols that work quickly. Your method is the opposite. Slow manual, constantly adjusted. It requires the doctor to observe and think continuously, which is exhausting. Rachel smiled despite her tiredness. But sometimes exhausting is what works. As dawn cycle approached, a new crisis emerged. The chelation was removing the toxin, but it was also stripping essential minerals from Rena's system. Her bones needed calcium. Her nerves needed magnesium. Her blood needed iron. Without these, she would survive the toxin only to die from the treatment. Rachel needed to know exactly what minerals Draven required and in what ratios. But that information was not in the station's database. It was not in any galactic medical reference she could access. The Draven were a private people who shared little about their biology with outsiders. Commander Trowell. Rachel turned to the grieving father. I need your help. What does Rena eat normally? What foods does your species need to stay healthy? Trowell looked up from his vigil. His eyes were red from lack of sleep and crying. Why does this matter? The treatment is removing toxins but also removing minerals she needs. I have to replace them, but I need to know which ones and how much. Tell me everything about Draven diet and nutrition. For the next hour, Trowell described the foods of his homeworld. Crystalline fungi that grew in deep caves, protein-rich insects with metallic shells, fruits that contained high levels of specific metals. As he spoke, Rachel took notes and made calculations. She was building a nutritional profile from scratch, using only the information a father knew about feeding his child. It was not precise. It was not scientific, but it was all she had. Rachel mixed supplements using compounds from the agricultural section, from the station's mineral storage, even from crushed vitamin tablets meant for human use. She created a solution that approximated what she thought Rena needed. If she was wrong, if the ratios were off, it could kill the cub as surely as the original toxin. This is a guess, Rachel admitted as she loaded the supplement mixture into an injector. I cannot be certain about the amounts, but without it, she will not survive. Trowell looked at the injector, then at his daughter, then at Rachel. You have brought her from death to life already. I trust your guesses more than I trust most people's certainties. Rachel administered the supplement slowly, watching for any adverse reaction. Minutes passed. Then Rena's color began to improve. The paleness in her scales was replaced by a healthier pink. Her breathing deepened and became more regular. The scanner showed her organ function stabilizing across the board. Incredible. Moss moved beside Rachel to check the readings. You created a species-specific supplement mixture, with no reference data and no laboratory analysis. Just observation and intuition, and desperation. Rachel allowed herself to feel relief for the first time in hours. Never underestimate desperation as a motivator. By full dawn cycle, other station personnel began arriving at the ceremonial chamber. Word had spread that something impossible was happening. The human veterinarian was saving a Draven cub using methods that made no sense. Doctors from several species gathered at the doorway, watching in silence as Rachel continued her work. Rena's vital signs had stabilized in the normal range for the first time since the crisis began. The crystalline deposits were almost completely gone. Her breathing was strong and steady. She was still unconscious, but she was alive and improving, actually improving. Rachel finally let herself sit down on the floor, her back against the wall. Every muscle in her body hurt. She could not remember the last time she had eaten or drunk water. Her medical bag lay open beside her, its contents scattered around the platform. Primitive equipment by galactic standards. But it had been enough. Trowell continued to hold his daughter's hand. He sang softly now, but the song had changed. It was no longer a death song. Rachel did not understand the words, but the melody carried hope instead of grief. Dr. Webb. Healer Moss approached and sat on the floor beside her, folding their multiple legs in a complex arrangement. I owe you an apology. I called your methods primitive. I dismissed your knowledge as inadequate. I was wrong. You followed your training. Rachel's eyes were heavy with exhaustion. I understand that. But that is precisely the problem. Moss gestured toward Rena with two of their arms. My training taught me to trust the systems, the protocols, the automated analysis. When those failed, I had nothing else. You, with your primitive equipment and intuitive approach, had everything. Rachel thought about that. Maybe it is not about primitive or advanced. Maybe it is about different ways of thinking. Your medicine is excellent for known problems. Mine is better for unknown ones. Together, they might be stronger than either alone. Moss chittered in agreement. A revolutionary thought. The galactic medical establishment believes we have evolved beyond the need for such manual, observational medicine. Perhaps we have lost something important in that evolution, or perhaps you just forgot it was there. Rachel pulled out a water bottle from her bag and drank deeply. Knowledge does not disappear when you stop using it. It just waits for someone to remember. Director Phillips returned with what looked like official documents on a datapad. He looked at Rena's stable vital signs, at Rachel's exhausted face, at Trowell's protective stance beside his daughter. He sighed and put the datapad away. I was going to cite you for multiple protocol violations. Phillips sat down on the floor with them, apparently giving up on maintaining directorial dignity. But I think those protocols might need revision. What you did tonight should not have worked. Yet here we are. Here we are, Rachel agreed. She was too tired to care about protocols or violations or consequences. She had done what she came to do. Rena was alive. Everything else could wait. But the galaxy, it seemed, was not willing to wait. Within an hour of dawn cycle, 3 ships arrived at Harmony Station. One carried a Draven medical team. One carried a council observer sent to investigate the incident. And one carried news reporters from 6 different species, all wanting to know about the human veterinarian who had saved a dying cub with primitive earth medicine. Rachel groaned and let her head fall back against the wall. I just wanted to help one patient. Why is everyone making this complicated? Trowell looked at her with something that might have been amusement. Because, Dr. Rachel Webb, you have done something that challenges what everyone believes is possible. The galaxy does not ignore such things. The galaxy can wait until I sleep. Rachel closed her eyes. Nothing else happens until I sleep. But even as she said it, she could hear the sound of many footsteps approaching the ceremonial chamber. The sound of questions being prepared, of theories being formed, of a galaxy that was about to learn something new about humanity and medicine and the value of thinking differently. Rena stirred slightly on the platform, her small hand tightening around her father's claw, still unconscious but alive and fighting. Rachel smiled despite her exhaustion. Whatever came next, whatever consequences she had to face, that small movement made everything worth it. The impossible had become possible. One careful observation at a time. High Physician Krell looked like he had swallowed something bitter. The senior Draven medical officer stood over Rena's platform with a scanner that probably cost more than Rachel earned in a year. His burgundy scales were marked with silver patterns that indicated decades of medical service. He ran the scan 3 times, each result apparently making him more unhappy. This is medically improbable, Krell announced to the assembled group. The toxin levels should have caused irreversible organ damage. Yet this cub's liver function is nearly normal. Her neural pathways show minimal scarring. Her respiratory system has almost completely recovered. He turned his golden eyes on Rachel. Explain how this is possible using your primitive methods. Rachel had managed 4 hours of sleep on a cot someone had brought to the ceremonial chamber. She had refused to leave Rena's side. Now she stood in front of what felt like a medical tribunal, facing questions from doctors who seemed more interested in proving her wrong than learning from what had worked. I used chelation therapy to bind and remove the toxin. Rachel kept her explanation simple. Activated charcoal to absorb residual contamination, oxygen support to maintain respiratory function, and mineral supplementation to replace what was lost during treatment. Such methods are centuries outdated. Krell gestured dismissively with his datapad. We have molecular scanners that can identify and target toxins at the cellular level. We have automated systems that calculate optimal treatment protocols. We have nanosurgical tools that can repair damage at the molecular level. Yet you claim success with equipment that belongs in a museum. I claim success because the patient is alive. Rachel pointed at Rena, who was sleeping naturally now instead of lying unconscious. Your molecular scanners couldn't identify the toxin. Your automated systems couldn't calculate a protocol. Your nanosurgical tools couldn't repair damage that was still being caused. I worked with what I had. Administrator Grove, the council observer, had been taking notes on a tablet for hours. The Pelin was tall and thin with pale blue skin and enormous dark eyes. Grove's species was known for being methodical and fair. Hi, Physician Krell. Am I correct that your team attempted treatment before Dr. Webb's intervention? We did. Krell's scales rippled with irritation. We used every standard protocol for toxin removal. The results were negative. Why did the standard protocols fail? Grove's voice was calm and precise. The toxin was unknown. Our databases contained no match. Without identification, we could not formulate an effective countermeasure. Krell seemed to realize how this sounded. Such situations are rare but not unprecedented. When they occur, the medical community collaborates to identify the substance and develop appropriate treatments. This takes time. Time the patient did not have, Grove noted. Yet Dr. Webb succeeded where your team failed, despite having inferior technology and no identification of the toxin. How? Krell had no answer to that. He turned back to his expensive scanner and pretended to read data he had already examined multiple times. Healer Moss stepped forward. The Quillen doctor had barely left the ceremonial chamber either. Administrator Grove, if I may offer an observation, Dr. Webb's approach was fundamentally different from standard galactic medical practice. She did not attempt to identify the toxin. Instead, she treated the symptoms and supported the body's natural elimination processes. That is not medicine, that is guesswork. Krell finally found his voice again. We have moved beyond such primitive trial and error approaches. Have we? Moss chittered thoughtfully. Or have we simply become dependent on our systems? When those systems fail, we have no alternative strategy. Dr. Webb demonstrated an alternative. The ceremonial chamber had become crowded with observers, medical staff from various species, station personnel, and news reporters with recording equipment. Rachel noticed at least 3 cameras pointed at her. This was not how she had imagined her career going when she signed up for the xenobiology exchange program. A commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Troll, who had left briefly to make reports to his homeworld, returned with another Draven in ornate armor. This new arrival was older, with scales so dark they were almost black and eyes that had seen too much. I am War Chief Dren of the Draven High Council. The newcomer's voice made everyone in the room stand straighter. I have come to witness the human who saved a child of my people. Rachel suddenly felt very small and very human, surrounded by aliens who were all taller than her. I am Dr. Rachel Webb, sir. I just did what I could. War Chief Dren moved to Rena's platform and looked down at the sleeping cub. His expression softened in a way that suggested he was a grandfather, as well as a military commander. Commander Trowell is my son. Rena is my granddaughter. The toxin that poisoned her also killed 3 adults in our delegation. They received the same standard treatment she did. They died within hours. The room went silent. Rachel had not known about other victims. She looked at Trowell, who nodded slowly. The supply ship that docked with us had contaminated rations. By the time we realized, it was too late. The adults were too far gone. Only Rena was small enough that her body fought longer. Your daughter survived because Dr. Webb intervened, War Chief Dren said to his son. Then he turned to Rachel. In Draven culture, when someone saves a bloodline from extinction, they become part of that bloodline. You are family now, Rachel Webb. What honors you honors us. What threatens you threatens us. High Physician Krell made a sound of protest. War Chief, surely a formal medical review should be conducted before such declarations. The human violated multiple protocols. The Council must investigate. The Council will investigate nothing. War Chief Dren's voice carried absolute authority. 3 Draven died using galactic standard treatment. 1 Draven lived using human methods. These are the facts. Anyone who wishes to dispute them may discuss it with me personally. Administrator Grove cleared their throat politely. War Chief, I appreciate the cultural significance of Dr. Webb's actions. However, I am still required to determine whether proper procedures were followed. The Galactic Medical Establishment has rules for patient care that exist for good reasons. I broke the rules. Rachel said it before anyone else could. I performed unauthorized treatment using unapproved methods on a patient who had been declared untreatable. I violated protocols. If someone needs to be punished, it should be me, not the station personnel who tried to stop me. Interesting. Grove made a note. You admit wrongdoing? I admit breaking rules. Rachel met the Pellin's enormous eyes. But I don't admit wrongdoing. Sometimes rules need to be broken. Rena was going to die. I had a chance to save her. I took it. A dangerous precedent. Krell gestured emphatically. If every doctor decides which rules to follow based on personal judgment, the entire medical system breaks down. We have protocols because individual judgment is fallible, and protocols are infallible. Rachel felt her temper rising despite her exhaustion. Your protocols declared a child dead when she could have been saved. Your systems failed completely. Maybe the problem is not that I broke the rules. Maybe the problem is that your rules do not account for situations they cannot predict. The news reporters were recording everything. Rachel realized this conversation was going to be broadcast across multiple systems. She probably should have been more diplomatic, but she was too tired to care about diplomacy. War Chief Dren laughed suddenly, a deep rumbling sound. This human has fire in her spirit. I like that. He looked at Administrator Grove. Pellin, you are known for being fair. Here is fairness. My granddaughter lives because this human acted. That is worth more than all your protocols and procedures. If you wish to punish her, you will make an enemy of the Draven people. Grove made another note. War Chief, I am not here to make enemies. I am here to determine facts. The question is not whether Dr. Webb saved a life. Clearly she did. The question is whether her success was skill or luck, and whether her methods can be validated for future use. Then validate them. Healer Moss stepped forward again. I observed Dr. Webb's treatment from beginning to end. She did not guess randomly. She observed, hypothesized, tested, and adjusted. That is the scientific method. The fact that she did it manually instead of through automated systems does not make it less valid. But can others replicate her success? Grove asked the key question. If her approach is based on intuition and experience rather than standardized protocols, how do we teach it? Before anyone could answer, Rena stirred on the platform. Her eyes opened slowly. They were pale gold, unfocused at first, then clearing as awareness returned. She looked at the crowd of large beings surrounding her and made a small frightened sound. Papa. Her voice was weak but clear. Tra was beside her instantly. I am here, little spark. You are safe. I do not feel good. Rena's small hand reached for her father's claw. Everything hurts. I know. Tral's voice was gentle in a way that seemed impossible for someone so large and fierce. But you are going to be fine. The human doctor made you better. Rena's eyes found Rachel in the crowd. You were small for a doctor. Despite everything, Rachel smiled. I am small for a human too. How do you feel besides the hurting? Tired, thirsty. Rena tried to sit up and winced. Did I break something? Your rib. I am sorry about that. Rachel moved closer to check Rena's vital signs with her scanner. I had to restart your heart. It was necessary but not gentle. You stopped my heart and started it again? Rena's eyes went wide. That is amazing. Can you teach me how to do that? The adults in the room exchanged glances. The cub had been conscious for less than a minute and was already asking medical questions. Rachel laughed, surprising herself. Maybe when you are older and finished with medical school. I want to go to medical school now. Rena looked at her grandfather. Can I, grandfather? Can I learn to fix hearts? War Chief Dren's expression was complicated, somewhere between pride and concern. We will discuss your education when you are well, little one. Administrator Grove watched this interaction with those enormous dark eyes. Finally, the Pellin spoke. Dr. Webb, I am prepared to make my recommendation to the council. However, I have one condition. Rachel tensed. What condition? Prove that your success was not luck. Grove gestured at the assembled medical personnel. Before me stand doctors from 6 species. Each has brought a case that has defied standard treatment. If you can successfully diagnose and treat 3 of these impossible cases using your adaptive methods, I will recommend no disciplinary action. Furthermore, I will recommend that the council establish a program to study and teach your approach. And if I fail? Rachel asked. Then we conclude your success with Rena was fortunate chance and protocols must be enforced to prevent future unauthorized treatments. Grove's voice was neutral, neither kind nor unkind. You will face formal sanctions, though I will argue for leniency. given the positive outcome. Rachel looked around the room. At Rena, weak but alive. At Trowel, protective and grateful. At Healer Moss, encouraging. At High Physician Krell, skeptical and hoping she would fail. At the reporters, recording everything for the galaxy to see. I accept your condition. Rachel surprised herself with how steady her voice sounded. Show me your impossible cases. The first impossible case arrived within the hour. A Valasian trader named Prill collapsed on the docking platform as her ship was unloading cargo. By the time they brought her to the medical bay, she could not move anything below her neck. Her species had nervous systems that ran through their entire body like a web instead of a central spine. Toxins that attacked those nerves were almost always fatal. She was exposed to something in deep space. The Valasian ship captain stood beside the medical bed where Prill lay paralyzed. We think it came from a cargo container that was damaged. By the time we realized, 3 crew members were affected. 2 died in transit. Prill has lasted longest, but she fades more each day. Rachel examined the patient carefully. Valasians looked somewhat like Earth's octopi, with flexible bodies and skin that changed color based on emotion. Prill's skin was gray, the color of fear and pain. Her large eyes tracked movement but could not communicate beyond blinking. How long since exposure? Rachel checked basic vital signs. 15 days. The captain's skin rippled with grief colors. Standard neural blockers did nothing. Regeneration therapy failed. The toxin continues to destroy her nervous system despite all treatments. Healer Moss pulled up Prill's medical records on a display. We have tried every known approach for neurotoxin damage. The substance is breaking down her nerve tissue faster than we can repair it. At current progression, she has perhaps 2 days. Rachel studied the readings. On Earth, we have creatures with distributed nervous systems similar to Valasian biology. Octopi, starfish, certain worms. When they suffer nerve damage, sometimes the problem is not the damage itself but the body's response to it. The immune system attacks the damaged tissue, making everything worse. We considered immune suppression. Healer Moss indicated notes in the file. But Valasians require active immune function to survive. Suppressing it would invite infection. I am not talking about suppressing the whole immune system. Rachel pulled up an image of Valasian neural structure. Just the specific response that is attacking nerve tissue. On Earth, we use targeted enzyme inhibitors for conditions like this. They block the inflammatory response without compromising general immunity. High Physician Krell, who had stayed to observe, made a dismissive gesture. Valasian biochemistry is nothing like Earth species. Your enzyme inhibitors would be useless or dangerous. Maybe. Rachel ignored his tone. But the principle might work. The toxin damages nerves. The immune system floods the area with inflammatory compounds. Those compounds damage healthy nerves nearby. The cycle continues. If we break the cycle, the body might heal on its own. She spent the next 3 hours researching Valasian immune responses and comparing them to Earth species with similar biology. The principles were surprisingly consistent. Inflammation worked similarly across species because it was such a basic biological function. What varied was the specific chemicals involved. Rachel mixed a compound using ingredients from the station's pharmacy, agricultural section, and her own supplies. It was designed to target the specific inflammatory markers in Valasian blood without affecting other immune functions. The dosage was based on calculations that filled 6 pages of handwritten notes. This is the most educated guess I have ever made. Rachel loaded the compound into an injector, but it is still a guess. I cannot promise it will work. The Valasian captain looked at Prill's gray, pain-filled skin. She dies if we do nothing. At least this is a chance. Rachel administered the treatment directly into Prill's primary circulatory node. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then Prill's skin began to shift color. Gray fading to pale blue, blue brightening to almost normal green. Her tentacles twitched. Her eyes focused more clearly. Can you feel this? Rachel touched one of Prill's tentacles. The tentacle curled weakly around Rachel's finger. Movement. Voluntary movement. The paralysis was breaking. Over the next 24 hours, Prill's improvement was steady. She regained control of her tentacles first, then her body core, then her complex color-changing abilities. The nerve damage was healing because the inflammation that prevented healing had been stopped. It was not a cure, but it was working. One success, Administrator Grove noted in that neutral voice. 2 more cases to go. The second impossible case came from the station itself. A young Horthan engineer named Bryn, had developed a condition where his bones were dissolving. Horthan's had crystalline skeletons that were incredibly strong, but also incredibly difficult to treat when damaged. Bryn had gone from healthy to barely able to stand in 3 weeks. It started after an accident in the engineering section. Bryn's voice was strained with pain. I was exposed to a coolant leak. Most species would have died instantly, but Horthan biology resisted the toxin. Instead, it did this. He gestured at his body, which trembled constantly from the effort of remaining upright. Rachel examined scans of Bryn's skeletal structure. The crystalline bones were literally dissolving from the inside out. In human terms, it looked like the most aggressive osteoporosis imaginable. If it continued, his skeleton would collapse completely within days. The coolant must have contained something that breaks down crystalline structures. Rachel compared Bryn's current scans to ones taken before the accident. But why did it not affect him immediately? Why this delayed reaction? Healer Moss pulled up chemical analysis of the coolant. The substance is designed to dissolve mineral deposits in ship systems. It should not affect organic matter at all. But Horthan's skeletons are semi-organic crystals. Perhaps that is the connection. Rachel thought about earth animals with unusual skeletal structures, birds with hollow bones, deep-sea fish with flexible skeletons, certain reptiles that could regenerate bone tissue. The key was not the structure itself, but the process of building and maintaining it. Bones are not static. Rachel spoke slowly, thinking out loud. They constantly break down and rebuild. In humans, we have cells that destroy old bone and cells that create new bone. The balance between them determines bone health. If Bryn's breakdown cells are overactive or his building cells are underactive, that would explain this. We tried mineral supplementation. Healer Moss indicated treatment notes. It did not help. His body cannot incorporate new material, because you are treating the symptom instead of the cause. Rachel was getting excited despite her exhaustion. The coolant probably did not attack his bones directly. It attacked the regulatory mechanism that controls bone maintenance. We need to reset that mechanism. She spent hours researching Horthan biology and bone metabolism. The species was poorly studied because they rarely needed medical care. Their crystalline skeletons were almost indestructible under normal circumstances, but these were not normal circumstances. Rachel developed a treatment protocol that combined targeted growth hormones, specialized minerals, and compounds designed to suppress the overactive breakdown process. She had to create everything from scratch because nothing like it existed in galactic medicine. This will take days to work if it works at all. Rachel explained to Bryn. Your bones need time to rebuild. You will need to stay immobile as much as possible to prevent fractures. I understand. Bryn's crystalline face was impossible to read, but his voice carried hope. I trust you, Dr. Webb. The treatment began. For 3 days, nothing seemed to change. Bryn's condition did not worsen, but it did not improve either. High Physician Krell made pointed comments about wasted time and false hope. Then on the 4th day, the scan showed new crystal formation, microscopic but present. Bryn's bones were rebuilding. By day 7, Bryn could stand without pain. By day 10, his bone density was approaching normal levels. It was slow, frustrating work, but it was undeniably working. Rachel had saved another impossible case. 2 successes. Administrator Grove's neutral tone might have contained the slightest hint of approval. 1 case remains. The 3rd and final case was the hardest. A Senari child named Lith had been born with a heart defect that should have killed him within hours. Somehow he had survived for 6 months, but he was fading. The Senari had brought him to Harmony Station as a last desperate hope. Rachel looked at the tiny infant lying in a specialized medical pod. Senari looked like a cross between earthbirds and lizards, with feathers and scales and eyes too large for their faces. Lith was so small he fit in one of Rachel's hands. His heart beat irregularly, fighting against a structure that could not support his body's needs. The heart chambers are malformed. The Senari mother, Preya, explained through a translator. Blood flows backward. Pressure builds incorrectly. No surgical technique can fix it. We were told to make him comfortable and accept what comes. Rachel studied every scan, every analysis, every measurement. The problem was clear. Lith's heart had the wrong architecture for Senari circulation. Their species needed high-pressure blood flow to support their unique respiratory system. Lith's heart simply could not generate that pressure. Surgery would not work. The structures were too small, too delicate, and too fundamentally wrong. But what if surgery was not the answer? What if we changed the requirements instead of fixing the heart? Rachel posed the question to healer Moss. Lith needs high-pressure circulation, but why? What if we reduce his body's pressure requirements? That is not possible. Moss clicked in confusion. Scinari physiology requires specific pressures. You cannot change that. Can we, though? Rachel pulled up information about Scinari respiration. On Earth, there are animals that live at different altitudes with different atmospheric pressures. Their bodies adapt. What if we help Lith's body adapt to function with lower blood pressure? She researched for 12 hours straight. The solution, when she found it, was elegant in its simplicity. A combination of medications that would alter Lith's blood chemistry, strengthen his arterial walls, and increase his blood's oxygen-carrying capacity. Together, these changes would reduce his circulatory pressure requirements enough that his malformed heart could handle them. This is experimental. Rachel was honest with Priya. I'm trying to change how his body works at a fundamental level. It might not work. It might cause other problems we cannot predict. But his heart will fail soon if we do nothing. Priya held her tiny son carefully. You saved the Draven cub. You saved the Valasian trader and the Horthan engineer. You are our hope, Dr. Webb. The treatment began. For 3 days, Lith seemed unchanged. Then on the 4th day, his color improved slightly. On the 5th day, his breathing became less labored. On the 6th day, the monitors showed his heart working more efficiently. It was still malformed, but it was coping with the reduced demands. Lith would need medications for his entire life. He would never be as physically strong as other Scinari, but he would live. He would grow up. He would have a chance. 3 successes. Administrator Grove stood before the assembled medical community with that tablet full of notes. Dr. Rachel Webb has proven that her approach is not luck. It is a valid alternative method based on adaptive thinking and comparative biology. High Physician Krell said nothing, but his scales had lost their earlier confidence. I will recommend to the council that no disciplinary action be taken against Dr. Webb. Grove continued. Furthermore, I recommend the establishment of a comparative medicine program to study and teach adaptive diagnostic approaches. Dr. Webb, would you be willing to lead such a program? Rachel looked at the 3 patients she had saved. At Rena, who was now well enough to visit the medical bay and watch everything with bright, curious eyes. At Healer Moss, who had gone from skeptic to ally. At the dozens of doctors from various species who had gathered to watch her work. I am a veterinarian, not a teacher, Rachel finally said. But yes, if it means helping more patients, I will try. 6 months passed faster than Rachel expected. The Comparative Medicine Initiative started small, with just 5 students and a converted storage room in the medical section. Now it occupied an entire wing of Harmony Station and had a waiting list of applicants from 20 different species. Rachel stood in what she still thought of as a classroom, even though it looked nothing like classrooms on Earth. The space was designed to accommodate species of various sizes and environmental needs. Some students sat on benches. Others floated in suspended platforms. A few needed specialized atmosphere controls. All of them watched her with the same expression of focused curiosity. Today we are not staying in the medical bay. Rachel picked up her ever-present medical bag. We are going to the agricultural section. The students exchanged confused glances. There were 8 of them in today's session. 2 Quillans, a Horthan, a Branthy, 2 species Rachel was still learning to pronounce, and Rena. The young Draven had recovered completely and immediately declared her intention to become a doctor. War Chief Dren had granted special permission for her to attend classes despite her age. Teacher Rachel, why do we study plants when we learn medicine? Rena asked in her direct way. At 3 years old by Draven counting, she had the curiosity of someone much older, because medicine is not just about memorizing treatments. Rachel led them through the corridors. It is about understanding patterns. Earth taught humans to look at many different types of life and find the connections. The agricultural section smelled like soil and growing things. Rachel had spent so much time here over the past months that the staff no longer questioned her presence. She led her students to a section where several types of plants grew under carefully controlled conditions. Look at these 3 plants. Rachel pointed to specimens from different worlds. They look nothing alike. Different colors, different structures, different evolutionary paths, but they all do the same thing. They convert light into energy, The mechanism is slightly different in each species, but the principle is the same. A Quillen student named Tress clicked thoughtfully. You are saying that different biology can achieve the same function through different methods. Exactly. Rachel smiled. And if you understand the principle behind the function, you can find solutions even when you have never encountered that specific biology before. That is what saved Rena. I had never seen Draven physiology before, but I understood the principle of toxin removal in reptilian biology. For the next 2 hours, Rachel guided them through exercises in comparative observation. They examined Earth animals, station pets, preserved specimens, and biological samples. The goal was not to memorize facts, but to develop the ability to see patterns across different forms of life. Healer Moss joined them halfway through. The Quillen doctor had become Rachel's closest colleague and most enthusiastic supporter. The afternoon session is ready when you are, Rachel. The afternoon sessions were practical applications. Students worked with actual patients under close supervision. Today they had 3 cases that standard protocols had struggled to address. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but challenging enough to require creative thinking. Rachel watched her students work. They were learning to ask different questions. Instead of what is the standard treatment, they asked why is this happening, and what similar situations might provide insight. It was slow progress. Centuries of protocol-based training did not vanish quickly, but progress was definitely happening. Rena worked with a Valasian patient who had a strange rash that would not respond to normal treatments. The young Draven examined the affected area carefully, asked questions about the patient's recent activities, and then disappeared into the research database. She returned an hour later with a theory about allergic reactions to a new food source. The Valasian ate imported fruit from a colony world, Rena explained to Rachel. Her species has never been exposed to that type of plant before. Her immune system is reacting to proteins in the fruit that are similar to a toxin her ancestors evolved to avoid. If we use an antihistamine combined with gradual exposure, her body should learn the fruit is safe. Good reasoning. Rachel checked Rena's research notes. But what made you think of food allergies instead of infection or environmental toxins? The pattern of the rash. Rena pointed to the patient's skin. It appears after meals and fades between meals. That suggests something being consumed rather than something external. Rachel felt a surge of pride. Rena was learning to think like a comparative medicine doctor. Observation first, then hypothesis, then research, then careful testing. It was the opposite of the galactic standard approach of protocol first, testing second, observation last. Evening cycle arrived before Rachel realized how long they had been working. Her students departed to their quarters exhausted but energized. Only Rena lingered, helping Rachel organize medical supplies. Teacher Rachel? The young Draven's voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. May I ask you something personal? Of course. You told my father that you had a daughter who died, that she was sick and the doctors could not save her. Rena carefully arranged supplies in their proper storage. Is that why you became a doctor? To save other children? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Partly, but mostly I became a doctor because I love solving puzzles. Medicine is the most important puzzle there is. When you solve it, someone gets to keep living. I am glad you solved the puzzle of me. Rena looked up with those golden eyes. My father says I would not exist without you. That makes you family in Draven culture. That makes you like a second mother. Something in Rachel's chest tightened painfully. Rena, I am honored, but I am not trying to replace your mother. You could not. Rena said simply. My mother died when I was very small. An accident on a training mission. I do not remember her much. But father says she would have liked you. She always said the best warriors were the ones who fought for life instead of death. Rachel knelt down so she was at Rena's eye level. Your mother sounds like she was very wise. She was. Rena suddenly wrapped her arms around Rachel in a fierce hug. Thank you for fighting for my life, second mother. Rachel hugged her back, this small alien child who had somehow found a place in her heart. Thank you for giving me a reason to keep fighting. Later that night, Rachel sat in the observation deck looking at Earth in the distance. It was barely visible from Harmony Station, just a small blue dot among millions of stars, so far away, yet its influence was spreading through the galaxy in unexpected ways. The Council approved full funding for your program. Healer Moss settled beside her with that complex folding of multiple legs. They also received requests from 6 other stations to establish similar programs. 6 stations? Rachel was surprised. That is more than I expected. Your success rate speaks for itself. 43 cases in 6 months. 38 successful treatments of conditions that standard protocols could not address. Moss chittered with satisfaction. You have proven that adaptive medicine works. Now everyone wants to learn it. It is not magic. Rachel watched Earth spin slowly. It is just a different way of thinking. Anyone can learn it if they are willing to question their assumptions. That is precisely why it is revolutionary. Moss adjusted their position to better see the view. Galactic medicine became standardized because standardization is efficient. But efficiency sometimes means we stopped asking why we do things certain ways. You remind us that medicine is not about following protocols. It is about healing patients. A message notification chimed on Rachel's datapad. She glanced at it and smiled. There is an emergency 3 systems away. A colony ship with a medical situation no one can diagnose. They are asking if I can consult remotely. Will you? Moss asked. I will try. Rachel pulled up the medical data and began reading, though I might need to send some students. They need experience with real emergencies. You have changed, you know, Moss observed. When you first arrived at this station, you were quiet and isolated. You worked in the agricultural section and rarely interacted with others. Now you lead a program, teach students, and consult across multiple systems. What changed? Rachel thought about that question while watching Earth turn in the distance. I guess I found something worth doing again. After my daughter died, I stopped believing I could make a difference. I took the veterinarian position here because it was away from everything that reminded me of her. I wanted to hide from grief by hiding from life. And now? Now I know that grief does not go away just because you hide from it. But maybe you can transform it into something useful. Maybe you can take all that love you still have for someone you lost and use it to help people who are still here. Rachel looked at Moss. Rena is not my daughter. None of my students are. But they give me a reason to keep trying, to keep learning, to keep fighting. That matters, Moss chittered softly. You know, when Administrator Grove first proposed this program, many medical professionals opposed it. They said humans were too new to the galaxy, too primitive, too different. They said your success was luck or limited to very specific situations. Some people still say that. Rachel had heard the criticisms. High Physician Krell gives interviews where he suggests my methods are dangerous and unproven. Yes, but he does so from his research position, while his own medical center quietly incorporates adaptive diagnostic training into their curriculum. Moss made a gesture that might have been laughter. Everyone wants to criticize you publicly while copying you privately. It is very galactic of them. Rachel smiled at that. The politics of medicine were complicated no matter what species was involved. As long as patients benefit, I do not care who takes credit. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Then Moss spoke again. You asked me once why galactic medicine failed where your approach succeeded. I have thought about that question for 6 months now. I think I finally understand the answer. What is it? We evolved our medicine to work with knowledge. You evolved yours to work with ignorance. Moss gestured at the vast star field beyond the observation window. The galaxy is old. We have been studying biology for thousands of years. We built comprehensive databases, automated systems, standardized protocols. All of that works beautifully when we encounter something we already understand. But when you encounter something new, Rachel prompted, we have no framework for it. Our systems are designed for known problems. Moss's multiple eyes reflected starlight. Humans are different. You came to the galaxy knowing almost nothing about alien biology. You had to develop methods that worked from a position of ignorance. You learned to observe, compare, hypothesize, test. The scientific method in its purest form. We learned to be adaptable because we had no choice. Rachel agreed. Earth has millions of species. We could not possibly memorize treatments for all of them. We had to learn principles instead. And now the galaxy needs that skill. Moss stood up, ready to return to the medical bay. We have become too comfortable with our knowledge. We forgot how to learn. You're teaching us again. After Moss left, Rachel remained in the observation deck. She pulled up the medical data from the colony ship again and began analyzing it. An unknown condition affecting multiple crew members. Symptoms that made no sense according to standard diagnostics. Exactly the kind of puzzle she had learned to love. She made notes, compared the symptoms to patterns she knew from Earth biology, formulated 3 possible theories. By morning, she would send a detailed consultation to the colony ship along with a list of diagnostic tests to run. If she was right, they could start treatment within a day. If she was wrong, she would revise her theories and try again. That was the beauty of adaptive medicine. Being wrong was not failure. It was information. Every mistake taught you something. Every success added to your knowledge. You kept learning, kept adapting, kept trying. Rachel looked at Earth one more time before heading back to her quarters. That small blue world had given humanity so much. Diversity of life that taught flexibility, challenges that demanded innovation, isolation that forced independence. Now those gifts were spreading to the galaxy, one impossible case at a time. She thought about her daughter, who she would carry in her heart forever, about Rena, who had become family in a way she never expected, about all the patients she had saved, and all the students she was teaching to save more. Medicine was about healing, but healing took many forms. Rachel had thought her own healing would come from isolation and forgetting. Instead, it came from connection and remembering, from taking the love she still had and using it to help others, from transforming grief into purpose. The galaxy was vast and full of impossible problems, but impossible just meant nobody had solved it yet. And Rachel had learned something important from her primitive, adaptable human approach to medicine. Impossible was just another puzzle waiting to be solved. And she was very good at puzzles. Her data pad chimed again. Another consultation request. A patient with symptoms that defied explanation. Another impossible case. Rachel smiled and began reading. There was work to do, students to teach, lives to save. The night cycle could wait. After all, someone out there needed help. And as a primitive human veterinarian with a gift for impossible cases, Rachel Webb was exactly the right person to provide it.